Vitaly Portnikov. In the midst of his ongoing election campaign, President Joe Biden is currently facing immense pressure and challenges as a result of various foreign policy issues and concerns. Maybe this is the initial occasion in numerous years when the President of the United States has to speak about not just domestic but also foreign policy challenges, clarifying how he plans to handle them in the last months before the presidential elections in the United States and in the event that he is re-elected to this position. The war in Ukraine is unlikely to end before the presidential elections in the United States. In addition, President Biden seems to have a preference for ensuring that voters do not frequently recall or remember this war and the fact that there is no real solution in sight, as it is a topic he would rather not emphasize or bring attention to. It is now being claimed that the President of the United States will not even be present at the World Summit in Switzerland, where leaders of several countries and foreign ministers who will gather at the meeting will discuss possible approaches to putting an end to Russia's war against Ukraine. Previously, Biden's attendance was perceived as a tangible potentiality due to the fact that the President of the United States will be in Europe immediately prior to the Switzerland summit, during the gathering of the Group of 7 leaders. However, it appears that the President of the United States is currently inclined to refrain from attending this meeting, possibly to prevent reiterating the challenges that emerged during the deliberations on strategies to conclude Russia's conflict with Ukraine and Ukraine's subsequent triumph. These topics have been extensively discussed by the President of the United States in recent years, and he has dedicated his political influence to them. Even the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who recently visited Kyiv, is engaged in discussions with Joseph Biden regarding the possibility of granting Ukrainian armed forces permission to launch strikes on Russian Federation territory using American weapons. Other politicians from Western nations are also making comparable proposals. However, President Biden is presently unable to make a definitive decision as he continues to have apprehensions about a direct conflict between Russia and the United States. And we observe a situation that, on one hand, is expected to serve as a crucial factor in preventing any further escalation between Moscow and Washington, thus helping to maintain stability and avoid potential conflicts between the two powers. Nonetheless, it is highly unlikely that Ukraine will take the initiative in a scenario where the entire sovereign territory of the Russian Federation is completely out of reach for Western missile strikes, thus making it beyond their range of influence and intervention. And the sole method for Ukraine to exert any form of influence on the military and defense potential of Russia is through the utilization of drone strikes, which lack the capability to completely annihilate Russian military enterprises, airfields, and oil refineries, but can still impact them to some extent. Thus, the initiative in terms of destroying military targets and critical infrastructure remains with Russia, and President Vladimir Putin is utilizing this initiative to his advantage. If the United States and other Western countries do not make the decision that their weapons can be employed to undermine the military and industrial potential of the Russian Federation, it is not to be anticipated that Russia's war against Ukraine will come to an end in the forthcoming years ahead of us in the foreseeable future. Another major challenge is the Middle East. In this region, the primary focus is on the sentiments and viewpoints of the traditional democratic electorate, which has been divided and conflicted over the response to the complex and sensitive issues that have arisen in the aftermath of the terrorist group Hamas's attack on Israel. In the initial weeks following this attack, nearly the whole civilized world expressed sympathy towards Israel, whose citizens were either killed by terrorists or taken hostage with the backing of the population in the Gaza Strip. Currently, the plight of the civilian population in this region is gaining prominence, resulting in numerous demonstrations against Israel and a rise in anti-Semitism in virtually all Western nations. The voters of President Biden on one hand are demanding increased support for Israel, which of course is putting pressure on the current president to compete with his predecessor, Donald Trump. On the other hand, they are also requiring Biden to pay attention to the suffering of the civilian population in the Gaza Strip and to reduce the support that Israel receives from the United States, both in terms of military aid and in terms of the positions of the United States in international organizations, particularly in the United Nations. These contrasting demands create a complex balancing act for President Biden as he navigates his foreign policy agenda. In the event that any of these groups of voters refuse to support Joseph Biden and simply remain indifferent during the upcoming presidential elections, it could potentially have a significant impact on the election results and pave the way to the White House for Donald Trump, ultimately determining the outcome of the election and shaping the future of the country for years to come. When we do not discuss those domestic political aspects that are the primary focal points of this pre-election campaign and that Biden and Trump will undoubtedly address during their debates, it is important to acknowledge the significance of these topics and the impact they may have on the outcome of the election. However, the most astonishing aspect is that the primary fundamental matters of these discussions will not revolve around domestic concerns of the United States or the strategy for border security with Mexico. Instead, they will focus on how the United States ought to conduct itself in its dealings with Russia and whether or not it should provide assistance to Israel in its endeavors within the gas industry and efforts to dismantle the terrorist group Hamas. The most fascinating thing is that while every question of domestic policy in the United States has a definite answer from each of the candidates for the position of head of state, the question of the crisis in Ukraine and the crisis in the Middle East appears to be at a complete standstill. Neither Biden nor Trump have a genuine response to the question of how to bring these wars to a conclusion and whether they can be brought to a conclusion at all. However, Biden, as the current president of the United States, undoubtedly finds himself in a much more vulnerable position than Trump, who may now be offering theoretical solutions to these unsolvable problems. Thank you, friends. Please stay on this channel, subscribe to it, and subscribe to kindly assist in promoting this channel on my social networks and informing your friends about it. Wishing you the best of luck.